Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our third installment of our webinar series. We're really excited to talk to you today about troubleshooting and schedule builder. We know you probably have a lot of questions and we have a lot of information to cover so that you feel well prepared for registration coming up soon. Our first years are going to be registering next week. Our transfer students are going to be registering in a couple of weeks. And so we're hopeful that this webinar will give you some good insight into how our system works so that you feel like you are ready to rock and roll when your pastime opens. I'm Jordan Dade. I will be your host for today. I'm joined by several of my colleagues in the engineering undergraduate office. They will be monitoring the question and answer tools. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use that. And we're really lucky to be joined today by S. S is a student and has used Schedule Builder extensively from the student side. So in terms of user interface, S is going to give you all of the insight that you might need and have questions about.
Oh, hi, I'm S. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature and we'll either answer it in the Q&A or on screen for everyone to see.
Yes. Okay, so it's always fun for us to get to know who's joining us. So if you wanted to use the chat feature and just practice using that, make sure that you share with all panelists and attendees where are you joining us from and also what your major is. And go ahead and feel free to use that now. It's always fun to see where everyone is. Just for your reference as well, we will be recording this webinar. When you checked in, they probably got a notification that it was being recorded. And we will be posting it onto our website for your future reference if there's any pieces that you wanted to go back and watch again. Our previous webinars, in case you missed any of our first two webinars, we have those posted on our engineering undergraduate new student information website. So we'll share those links at the end of the presentation in case you wanted to go back to those as well. All right. Thank you so much for sharing where you're all from. I'm so excited to see a huge diversity of majors and also locations. Great. Okay, so today, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Schedule Builder. We're going to be going over the tool and what you can expect to see when you're interfacing with the tool. We're going to help you identify how to choose particular sections of courses that won't conflict with one another. We'll go over some typical registration issues and some common questions that we get just so that you can be prepared with that information ahead of time. And then also we're going to cover the importance of selecting alternative courses in case the first choices that you have are full or unavailable at the time that you're ready to register. Okay. So what is Schedule Builder? Schedule Builder is our web-based registration system. You can kind of think of it as a course marketplace where you go to select the classes that you'd like. You can pick them ahead of time, and then you can use a checkout feature or register feature to actually reserve your seat in those classes. You'll be able to also see lots of really important information about the classes themselves, but your pastime, when you will be able to access the registration system and actually search and register for courses. What's great is that you can use Schedule Builder as a planning tool where you can select classes that will work with one another and save them to a schedule that allows you to then go in and assess what's open during your registration period and choose the sections that will be available to you. We'll talk about the waitlist feature. Waitlist is something that is available to you in Pass 2. The university's found that the way to keep things as fair as possible for students who want to register for classes is to limit the number of units you have and then to start waitlists during Pass 2 so that everyone gets a fair chance at the classes that they need. We'll also go over the feature that allows you to swap sections. This feature allows you to save a seat in a class that you're registered in, but if a different seat in a different section becomes available, you can move into that section without losing your original seat until the selection has been made. So that means that you don't have to drop a class, lose all of the registration priority that you had in the section that you were already in, and you'll be able to transition into the new one. Okay. So accessing Schedule Builder. if you can, I would love to see a raise of hands. If you can use the raise hand feature in the chat, we'd love to see who has actually used and accessed Schedule Builder. Has everyone had a chance to get into Schedule Builder? Oh my goodness. Excellent. It looks like everybody's been doing some research in Schedule Builder. That's fantastic. Well, if you haven't yet, it's important that you practice ahead of time. This allows you to get into the system in an authenticated way to make sure it's you and no one's accessing your account without your permission. And then you'll be able to do that through My UC Davis. There's a little sign-in screen up at the top corner. Once you're there, you're going to want to go to the Academics tab, and the Academics tab will take you to this locked area called Registering for Courses. That allows you to go into Schedule Builder under your own identity so that there's no confusion of who it is that's wanting to select those classes. So when you are into Schedule Builder, you'll then see a drop-down box that allows you to select a term that's either active or becoming active soon. So as you're planning ahead, you'll see that you might see a summer session 1 or summer session 2 when you use the drop-down box right now. But what you're looking for is fall quarter 2020. I want to be clear that we use the quarter system at the undergraduate level. There may be a selection option to choose fall semester, but those are for different programs. You're looking for the fall quarter 2020 option. And when you select that, then you'll be able to click continue and see the classes that are available to you in that term. So other critical information provided to you in Schedule Builder includes hold information and also your pastimes. So being allowed to register means that there are no active holds on your record and that it is your window of opportunity or your pastime to actually access the registration system. If you are using Schedule Builder outside of those times or with an active hold, you won't be able to change your enrollment or register for classes. What's important to see though, and you might see an immunization hold, is the active date and the impacted quarter. So immunization holds go on early. Our student health and counseling services staff are looking to make sure that everyone coming to campus has all of their documents in. If you don't have your documents in, they understand your fall quarter registration will not be impacted. According to this immunization hold, you'll see that that's going to begin on November 3rd, so well after your Pass 1 for fall, and it's only going to be impacting winter quarter and beyond. So you will want to get it taken care of before your winter registration, but you do have some time and you'll be able to register for fall quarter classes. Your pastimes are really important. What the pastime doesn't show you though is the end time to this. So your pastime is a window of 4 hours that you'll initially be able to access the system and register. We'll go over some open registration times after your Pass 1, but it's important that you know when your Pass 1 is going to begin so that you can get into those classes as soon as possible. So Pass 1 is your first opportunity to register for courses. If you want to change your classes, or if you want to add additional courses, or if you wanted to register for a class that's full, you wouldn't be able to do that in Pass 1. You would have to wait until Pass 2, and that's when you can adjust your schedule or waitlist for courses that are full.
Oh, Jordan, we have a quick question.
Oh, great.
Yeah, how many units can you register for at Pass 1?
Oh, what a fantastic question. So in Pass 1, you're limited to 17 or less units. We ideally want you to be around 15 units, but 12 units is the minimum number of units required for full-time enrollment status. So ideally, a student will be in 12 units by the end of Pass 1, but they can go up to 17 units, but we don't recommend anything beyond that really in the first quarter. In Pass 2, that number is extended so that students who want to waitlist for courses can be in a combination of registered or waitlisted units up to 19. So it just gives the student a little bit more flexibility. But everybody's limited to 17 units or less in Pass 1. And unfortunately, there's no exceptions with that. We get that question a lot. Thanks, S. Do we have any other questions right now?
Not at the moment.
Okay, perfect. So your registration window for our first years is going to be July 27th will be your pass one time, and you'll have an open registration opportunity through July 29th. And what that means is you will have a 4-hour window. If you have a morning registration, that'll begin at 8 a.m. and go until 12 noon. If you have an afternoon registration window, you'll be able to access the system at 1 p.m. And then after 5 p.m., if you see that a class that you wanted wasn't available during your first try, or you need to make a change, or you missed your pass time, you'll be able to access the system that same day from 5 p.m. to midnight. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday from 6 a.m. to midnight. So you might get contacted by an advisor who noticed maybe a mistake in your schedule, or wanted to confirm with you that the course you registered for was what you intended, because some of our courses do sound a lot alike. So if an advisor recommends any changes, this is the time period that you'll be able to make those changes. Okay. Exploring Schedule Builder. So Schedule Builder tells us a lot about the courses that you will be selecting, as well as how they fit with one another. You'll see at the bottom of this screen, after you save courses, you'll be able to also see on a calendar view how those final exams might coexist with one another. You'll see here that there's also an opportunity to drop down to different schedules, and we'll go over how to make multiple schedules, because you'll find that you'll want to have a couple different options in case sections of classes that work really well together are full. You'll want some plan B and maybe even plan C, just to make sure you get the schedule that you need and the classes that you need in Pass 1. So to create a new schedule or a different version of a schedule, so let's say you have a plan 1 or plan 2, plan 3, going to create a new schedule allows you to rename the schedules that you have, so that you can keep track of which one is your first choice, maybe which one is your second choice, or maybe you have two that are really similar in terms of the classes that you're choosing. Being able to more quickly identify which schedule you're working with is a great reason to rename the schedules.
Hey, Jordan, we have a couple more questions now.
Great.
Yeah, so the first one is, how much time do we have to register for classes after our Pass 1 time starts?
Oh, that's a broad question that has lots of little details in the answer. So after Pass 1 starts, you have 4 hours in your initial pass time. After that window of 4 hours is complete, then you would have to look at the open registration hours following your pass time. So that might be later in the day. That might be for those 2 additional days after Pass 1. It could be in different windows of opportunity the weekend following. But for this Pass 1 time, you'll have 4 hours and then the open hours of registration following that.
All right. The next question is, do we have to register for the classes our advisor told us, or can we register for our choice of courses?
Yes. So that's a complicated answer too. The reason why your advisor made specific recommendations is because we want to see you start making progress toward your major requirements, and also prioritize any additional courses that are really important. So things like your writing classes, especially if you have a preparatory writing class, that should not be ignored. Math classes for our College of Engineering students is going to be really critical. So we want you, especially our first years, to take those math classes that may be necessary. If you're a transfer student, the recommendations that your advisor makes are going to be based on the credit that you're bringing with you from community college. So to prevent any duplicate credit issues, or to make sure that you're moving forward with your prerequisites, we do recommend that you talk with your advisor about the recommendations that they've made. If there is a class that you'd like to register for that your advisor did not recommend, it might be a good idea to check in with an advisor, either major advisor or with one of us during express advising, just because there are going to be certain priorities, and for different students, those priorities might be more important and critical than others. So not every class is offered every quarter, and a lot of times that will factor into the advice that we give. So if you're doing something different than specifically what you and your advisor discussed, it's a good idea to check back in again just to confirm that you're not going to start off in a different direction than what's recommended for your major.
All right, another good question. When you say Pass 2 is limited to 19 units, does this include the units you have already registered for? Is this limit just for first years, or do all undergraduates have this limit?
Great question. It is a universal limit, and it is a total number of units. So in Pass 2, a student could extend up to 19 units of waitlisted and or registered courses combined, and that is for all students. But again, it's rare that we're recommending a student register in 18 units or more. Usually it's just to use the waitlist feature while students are deciding between their courses that it's recommended you go that high anyway.
Yeah, and then another question, is there a chance that seats will be opened up for classes like GEs and UWP?
Great question.
Or what time will the seat release be?
Yeah, so really, really important questions when you are scheduling and planning ahead. So that ties in really nicely, I think, with the slide that we're on with add and search courses. So what you see now in Schedule Builder may or may not be accurate based on what you're going to be registering for fall quarter. There are going to be some large courses that have seats reserved for students in our majors, and we're going to save those seats for the students in the morning registration period and the afternoon registration period. It's a good idea to look at what seats are released for those groups right before your registration. So if you're going into Schedule Builder now, identifying the classes you want is really important so that when you see the seats that are available, you can identify which sections have open registration seats and will work with the other courses you're selecting. So for our afternoon registrants, you'll be able to see your seat release seats at noon on Monday, just before your registration period. For our morning students, you'll see those seats a little bit earlier. You'll probably be able to access them on Friday or Saturday. So you'll be able to see the seats and build optional schedules around those.
And a similar question, what do you do if there's no open seats in the courses you need to register for?
Well, guess what we're talking about later this presentation is exactly that. We want you to have some backup plans. And so hopefully in your meetings with your advisors, you talked about priorities, what courses are going to be most important for you to register for, and then the options. What happens if you are unable to get an elective that you were looking at, or a GE course, or maybe your writing courses are full. Identifying some other appropriate opportunities is really important.
A similar question is, what if we end up registering for less than 12 units during Pass 1?
It is strongly recommended that you do find a schedule that you could take consisting of 12 units or more during Pass 1. If you cannot, then you would be able to add additional units during Pass 2 or the open registration periods. But we do want you registered in at least a full-time schedule by the end of Pass 1, if at all possible. So if you're really concerned that you can't get an appropriate schedule, look for classes like general education, but also add classes that you would actually take if you started the quarter and registered in those. So GE classes that you have an interest in that are appropriate to your knowledge foundation, so not having anything with writing experience if you haven't satisfied entry level writing, nothing in an upper division level if you are a lower division student, things like that.
Yeah, and then the last question we'll be answering for now, the one that we're all wondering, when do we know which classes will be virtual?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a way to identify those classes in Schedule Builder right now. Our faculty have been asked to provide instruction in the most flexible ways possible. We do expect that unless otherwise noted or communicated to you, the classes you're registering for will have an online option. There may be a few upper division labs that don't have an online option, but that will be clearly communicated to the students who are registering for those classes. When you see a course description with a date, time, and location, that allows us to offer multiple sections of classes that a student can register for that will not conflict. We'll get to course conflicts in a little bit, but you'll see that when you're registering for classes, you'll be able to check and make sure that there's no time conflicts, so that even if a class was completely online, if there were any synchronized learning activities, they wouldn't conflict with one another and you wouldn't have to be forced to choose one class or the other. If you see a class that is offered virtually, we do have some classes that are already going to be noted as V or Y. V implies a virtual format, which would include completely online intended programs, usually completely asynchronous. And then hybrid indicates that the course is usually taught online and in person. But of course, the in-person pieces will be limited. We also received an email from the chancellor last week that indicated that there wouldn't be any class meetings for any classes that had an enrollment of 50 or higher. So you can assume those large math classes, those large chemistry lectures are all going to be online for sure.
Thanks, Jordan.
Okay, so when you're searching for courses, you may know exactly what class you're looking for example, Math 21A, and you could punch that criteria in. But if you're really searching for something and you're looking for maybe a GE that would complement your priorities for registration, then you can look by course level. So you want to choose courses that are listed 0 to 99. Those are going to be your lower division courses. Even you transfer students looking for GEs, we don't recommend upper division GE classes if you can avoid it, unless you have extensive experience and met the prerequisites for the courses. When looking for GE credit for the College of Engineering, again, you're going to be looking for classes with arts and humanities and social sciences. You can certainly add courses that have science and engineering credit, but you don't need any additional credit in those areas if you're going to complete an engineering degree. And you can go back and look at our GE webinar for more information about that. Do we have any additional questions, S?
Yeah, so I think if you go back a couple slides,
Sure.
there's a student that has a red caution notification on ENG4. I'm wondering, what does it mean? And when they press on it, it doesn't say anything. How do they interact with it?
That's a good question. So the red notification could be an indicator through a Google extension that there's a course conflict, but it could also mean that the system doesn't recognize a prerequisite. So I would have to see what the screen looked like. S, is there anything that you can add from the user perspective that might give more insight?
Yeah, typically when I see those, it's because a prerequisite hasn't been processed yet. For some reason, it's saying that you're not registered for a course that you also need to be registered for to take that class. And that leads into our next question, like, how do prerequisite petitions work?
Ah, that's a great question. So if I were to try to add a course that has a prerequisite that the system doesn't already identify as me having it complete, then I will be prompted to complete a prerequisite petition. The petition can be drafted ahead of time, and I think we will have some slides about that later in this presentation. It can be drafted ahead of time so that when your pastime opens, you can hit that submit button, and then the system will allow you to register for the course. At that point, if a seat is open in the class and you've submitted the prerequisite petition, you will be allowed to register for the class. But it could be that if your professor does not approve the petition, you could be dropped from the course. So you should only be submitting prerequisite petitions if you truly have the prerequisite. Common prereq petitions for fall quarter might include anything that is referring to AP credit for prerequisites. Something like the ECS placement exam is not stored in Oasis or Schedule Builder, so the system isn't going to know what you scored on your CS placement exam. So you might have to tell the system, I scored 15 on the CS placement exam, and so I want to register for ECS 36A. What's important and what's highlighted here is that you can show details to see what exactly the prerequisites might be. So if you expand the course description and look at show details, this particular class does not have any prerequisites, but you will see it has writing experience. So you would want to complete your entry-level writing before taking this class. And it will also tell you when the final exam is scheduled, description of the course, what the drop date is. Once you've decided, oh, this is the course for me, this is the section I want to take, you can hit save, and that will be added to whatever schedule is posted or visible and selected in Schedule Builder.
Yeah, and just adding from my own experience.
Yeah,
As a
please.
transfer student, sometimes your transcript isn't processed yet or doesn't recognize some courses that you took at your community college as prerequisites for the courses that you need to take. So I know that my first couple quarters, I was doing a lot of prerequisite petitions, and they're very easy. If you have the actual prerequisites, then they won't get denied and you'll get to stay in your course.
That's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. We expect that transfer credit, including AP, IB, A-level scores, will be visible in Oasis. Hopefully by the end of fall quarter. It does take a lot of time and energy on our counterparts in admissions and the registrar's office to process those that credit that they receive through the summer as quickly as possible. So if you don't see it posted right away, do not despair. We likely have it, we just haven't been able to process it yet. So completing those prerequisite petitions will be really important. Thanks, S, for sharing that.
Yeah, a similar question is that a student has several courses labeled as TR1, some of which are upper division transfer courses. How would they go about the process?
So if transfer work was completed at a four-year institution or an institution outside of California, we may not have it articulated as equivalent to a UC Davis course. In the event that TR credit is not articulated, it doesn't mean it's not valuable. It just means that we might not recognize it immediately as being equivalent to one of our courses. So it's a good idea to check in with an advisor to review your TR credit, especially if it's related to your major, to identify what petitions might need to be submitted, what information, including syllabus, course descriptions, textbook information, information from you about what your learning activities were like for department review. Different departments have different protocols for how that credit is reviewed. Our math department has done a really good job of standardizing their review process with an online form. Within the College of Engineering, we have a form that you can take to any department for evaluation of your credit. So connecting with the engineering undergraduate office is a really good way to start that process, or maybe even checking in with your major advisor if it's related to your major. If it's transfer credit that is what we would consider from the College of Engineering perspective, general education credit, so anything in arts and humanities or social sciences, we have more time to get that evaluated. And even if it's not a class that is equivalent to what we offer at UC Davis, it may still have credit that you could use toward graduation requirements in those areas of arts and humanities or social sciences. So we would want to talk a little bit further about how that credit is transferred.
Yeah, and another question we have is, how come some classes are already full?
So classes may be showing as already full because the seats are hidden, right? We haven't posted our seat release numbers yet, so you might not see them. And maybe the classes are popular with continuing students, or may already be full based on the registration that our upperclassmen have completed already. So it's possible that classes are full, but it's also possible that we're holding seats back for the students in our pastime. So it would depend on the course, but that's why it's always good to know what your priorities are in terms of registration, so you can identify and build around those priorities, and then look for opportunities for flexibility in any electives or GEs that you're choosing.
Yeah, and a similar question. The student has multiple schedules set up. Should they select the one that's not completely open, even if it's the one that's completely open, even if it's not their favorite?
I would say yes in Pass 1. It's more important to get the classes you need than the schedule that's most convenient for you, because chances are the times that you like to work are probably pretty similar to the times that other people like to work too. So you will see that certain sections are popular based on timing or availability that way. But it's more important that you take the classes you need. So if it's a GE that you really, really want, but isn't at a time that works well for you, postpone it. Put it on a list on your wall or on your phone to refer back to for future opportunities to take those classes when the timing does work better for you or the rest of your schedule. I would also encourage to consider breaks. I know coming from high school, it's really easy to think about a school day as back to back to back, but in college, you're going to want some time to process and transition between subjects. So having breaks between your classes is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, a similar question to what you just mentioned on breaks is, I noticed that there's maybe little time between classes. How much time difference is recommended?
That's a personal choice and decision, and it depends on which activities are divided by just a few minutes. If you have a class that has a lecture and then a discussion immediately after, that kind of timing might work really well for you, just having a quick 10-minute break in between. Usually the class times are set up to be 10 or more minutes apart. But if you have two completely unrelated courses and lectures back to back, if you're still processing the information that you learned in the first lecture, you might not really be attentive to what's happening in the second lecture. So if a class is offered with live lectures, or if material is posted and available at specific times, then you're going to want more time in between classes just for that transition period. But likewise, if you're not someone who wants or needs 3 hours between classes and you have the opportunity to find a more compact schedule, do that. It's a very individual kind of question.
Yeah, and then another question we have is, how do you quickly select a new course that fits your schedule if you don't get registered for one of the courses?
So that's a great question. The strategy that I suggest is to look at the different classes that you would put into your schedule, and then identify the section numbers by this little 5-digit number is called a CRN number, course registration number. It's great to identify the different classes and the different sections that would work with each schedule you have without any time conflicts. So that way, if I know that my math class and my writing class and my programming class all work with section 26151, then I can quickly put in 26151 into my schedule without having to go back and search. But if I know that my schedule would work with any of these 4 sections, then I would want to take note of all of those CRN numbers. So if 26151 fills up, then I go to 26153 and I just start filtering that way.
Similar question to that one we have is, for backup schedules, should we make ones with different sections for all classes, or replace one class in a different section than the desired schedule?
I think that depends on how many permutations of a schedule you want. But having more diversity in your schedules means that there's more likelihood that you'll be able to identify classes and sections that work well together. So, you know, you don't have to have an infinite number of schedules created. I think that might be bothersome, but if you put all of your hopes in one math section that fills up quickly and you don't have a plan B for a different math section, that could potentially cause a little bit of frustration or panic during Pass 1. But don't worry, and we'll get to this. Most students have what they need by the end of Pass 1. May not be your first choice of elective or GE, but we can definitely work with you to find a schedule that's going to help you get closer to graduation. So try not to stress too much.
Yeah, and a question that kind of rolls into that panic around registration is, what if a class that needs to be finished ASAP? Is there a chance that there will be seat releases?
It's possible. It would depend on the course, but also remember Pass 2 with the wait lists allow you to sort of stand in line for that class in the order that you're accessing it. So if you're waitlisted number 2 in a class that has 100 people, you're probably going to roll into that class just by nature of students changing their mind, right? After registration happens, students go back to their advisors, have conversations about what was successful and maybe what they weren't able to add, and changes happen just sort of naturally. So the wait list also is the best way to communicate to a department that there is demand for this class. And so particular departments have more flexibility with resources or will be able to add additional sections if possible. Sometimes particular classes might be allowed to expand in their enrollment numbers as well. So it really depends on the course, what the solution might be. But sometimes the solution is to plan ahead for the next quarter.
Yeah, and speaking from my own experience for that one, it depends on the course whether you'll get off the wait list. For courses that everyone needs to take, like the math courses, the physics courses, sometimes it's harder to get off the wait list just because people will really want those sections. For later on when you're taking electives, there's a really good chance you get off the wait list. I've been on the wait list in seat like 30, seat 50, and gotten into the class just because people's schedules change. Maybe they take the class for a couple of days, they're not interested. So we always recommend waitlisting for the courses you want to get into.
Definitely, definitely. So what's great about Schedule Builder is that you can see the space between your classes if you use the calendar view. So I love looking at the calendar view. This is just how my brain operates versus list view. So once you've chosen some sections of classes that you want to take, you can pop over to the view drop-down option and choose calendar, and then you can see how all of those classes fit together. So what I like about this particular schedule is that there is a gap of a little over an hour that would allow you to clean up your notes, review the lecture material that you just covered before looking at the next particular lecture material. But what you'll see is that there's two sections of the same course. This is two Math 21A sections. So the system actually won't allow you to register for two sections of the same course if you were to maybe try out different schedules. So there are some limitations built into the system that you'll want to use what we call the pre-check to make sure that there's no conflicts like that.
Okay. Another question we have is,
sure.
Where can I find the prerequisite petition in OASIS?
So the prerequisite petition is going to actually be in Schedule Builder if you have, if the system has indicated that you don't have a prerequisite petition or you don't have the prerequisite met for a course. You would submit the petition within Schedule Builder. If you had transfer credit that needed to be evaluated, that is a form that is not in OASIS. That's a form that you can get from one of the advisors in the engineering undergraduate office. Okay, so the pre-check for the registration option allows you to check for any conflicts. So any time conflicts, any course conflicts in terms of, you know, accidentally saving two chemistry sections to the same schedule. It'll tell you if there's a problem. It will also tell you if there are seats in the class before you're getting ready to register. So just before your registration pass time, you'll want to go through and do the pre-check just to make sure that when your pass time opens up, you can click that button and be good to go. So once registration opens and your pass time clicks to the appropriate hour, then you'll be able to use the register all button. Don't hit refresh, don't hit it multiple times, click it once and let it run. It might take up to 30 seconds to a minute for Schedule Builder to push all of your registration. But what you'll see at the end of that push is the classes that you were able to successfully register in. If there was something that shows up after you've clicked that button that says not registered, that means that either it filled up before you got into it, or that's usually the issue. It filled up before you got into it. So then you would be able to go through that list of backup plans that you had, or look for a different section of that course to see if you could get into an alternative option at that point. Okay, so once you've registered, this is the green button that you want to check to confirm that each course was individually registered. A lot of times students will hit that registration button and then not realize that maybe one of their registration items didn't go through. At the end of your registration, you'll also be able to see how many units you've scheduled for. Something that you'll notice here is that workload units might be different than total schedule units. And the reason for that is we have certain classes called workload classes. They're literally called WLD, and they focus on different topics, and they're preparatory classes. They're preparatory classes offered by our partner, Sacramento City College. And because those are preparatory classes offered technically by community college faculty, those units don't count toward graduation requirements, but they do count toward your total number of units enrolled. So for example, if you have a preparatory writing course to take for entry-level writing, one of the options available to you is workload 57E or P. E is for most students, P is for a special program. But let's say you register for workload 57E for your writing requirement, plus your math class, plus a major requirement. If you're mechanical, maybe you're registering for engineering 4, for example. The total number of units registered is going to show only the units that are counting toward graduation. It's your workload units that are going to show you your total enrollment. So that 4.5 units of workload credit that you get toward your full-time student status for F1 students, for my international friends, and also for financial aid and things like that, that will count here. So that's what those number discrepancies might be if you've registered for a workload class. Other popular workload classes are workload 41C as a prep chemistry class, or you might have some co-classes with different courses that are recommended for you. So just keep in mind that those workload units do add time to your schedule, and they will count toward your full-time student status. How are we doing on questions, S?
Yeah, we have a bunch right now.
Oh boy, okay. Maybe let me go through the rest of the presentation, then we can use the rest of our time for Q&A.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. So earlier we talked about the swap section feature. So if you have saved a class that either you want to change or a section that you want to move into a different section that would work better with your schedule, if there's a seat available in that other section, you can use the swap section feature to save your place in the class you're in and then trade into the class you want. If that seat that you want becomes unavailable while all of that processing is happening, you don't lose the seat that you have. Conversely, you might know for sure you don't want to continue in something that you've registered for. You certainly, most definitely want to drop the class. You've decided that is the end. So then you would use the drop feature to remove the class without swapping into a different section. Eventually you could swap into a different section, but dropping the class means you have committed to removing it from your schedule. Okay, so in pass 2 is when waitlisting will begin as an option. You can only register and waitlist for one section of a course. So you can't register for one Math 21A class and then waitlist for a different section of Math 21A. You would have to commit to one or the other. In the situation with math, I always recommend stay in the seat you have. If space becomes available, don't waitlist. Use the swap section feature later if there's a different class that you would prefer more. We recommend making all of those decisions as early as possible. Waiting to do this much further into the quarter means that you're likely missing important information. So just keep that in mind. that waitlisting and registration require a commitment to one or the other. You can't do both for the same class. Okay, typical registration issues that we see. If classes are full, then what you'll want to do is make sure that you are checking just before your registration period to see if there's any seat releases that have been made. If every section of a class that you need is full, even after your registration period has started, then what we would want to do is look for some appropriate alternatives for you to enroll in so that you can achieve that full-time student status by the end of your PASS 1. Prerequisite petitions, we've talked a little bit about this, that if the system does not recognize that you have completed a prerequisite, you may be prompted to submit a petition. Again, you can draft that petition ahead of time and then submit it once your PASS time opens. And it's always a good idea a few minutes before you're getting ready to register to refresh your browser. Chances are, if you see an error in Schedule Builder, it is solved either by opening a new window or refreshing your browser history, because there are times that it does take a while for Schedule Builder to move forward into the next step, and it has a pretty good memory even when we don't necessarily want it to. So my advice would be to get your schedule all set up, and then about 10 minutes before you're getting ready to register, hit the refresh button so that your browser is fresh when your PASS time opens. Okay, things to keep in mind. Base your schedule on what your personal requirements and priorities are. While it's easy to look at an academic plan that might be a sample or might be your friends in a similar major or the same major, there could be differences in what's a priority for you versus what's a priority for them. So it's really important that if your advisor made some specific recommendations for your situation, that you understand them. And if there's anything that's changed since you spoke with your advisor, or if any questions have come up, connect with an advisor. If your major advisor is unavailable, we'd be happy to help you in the engineering undergraduate office to identify opportunities for you. But take classes that interest you. Take classes that are a priority for you. And then you may not get every single class that you want in your very first quarter of registration, but fear not. We are very likely to be able to incorporate those interests later on in further quarters if necessary. And be open to early morning or evening classes. We do have a lot of students in a lot of classes, and some may or may not be ideal for you, but if your 10 a.m. math class is full, maybe consider that 4 p.m. one instead. Okay, few other things. We will have live registration support available to you via a webinar format. So we will have advisors available to use the question and answer feature during that registration time for our incoming first year students on Monday. Check for additional course modality information. We're hoping to be able to clarify for you exactly which courses are going to be offered in which formats. But for now, assume that what you need is what will be available. And not to worry, we will help you through this entire process, and we're looking forward to doing it. So take a deep breath and look forward to starting those fall classes. If you have additional questions, again, always contact your major advisor or our office. Here's our email address. There are video tutorials if you want to take a screenshot of this to capture these URLs. It might be helpful. We have a video tutorial of how to use Schedule Builder, and then we have our previously recorded webinars. The registrar's website is also a really great place to go if you have questions about past times and things like that. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions that we have. We're scheduled to keep going for another 12 minutes, but I'm available beyond that if there are additional questions.
Yeah, so a question that's popping up a lot is, how do we see which classes will have seats released and when will that happen?
That's a great question. There isn't a centralized list of places you can go to see seat release, but checking in with an advisor is probably going to be helpful for you. But more important than knowing what will have seat release versus what won't is what's going to be available to you during your registration period. So it is a good time, a good idea to just check several minutes before your pass one, just to see what will be available during your registration time. Just because course availability is more complicated beyond just seat release.
Another registration question is there an advantage to choosing a course or a section with more open seats available?
Yeah, you're more likely to get into it during your pastime. Different people choose different courses for different reasons. Seat availability is not always a good indicator if a class is better or worse than another section. If you know, there's lots of seats in a 4 p.m. section and you're a late afternoon person, that's a great reason to choose a class, even if there's more seats available. So I wouldn't say scarcity is an indicator of value.
The next question is how and when does the pre-check registration work?
So pre-check registration will tell you before your pastime if the classes that you have selected and built into a particular schedule will work with one another. So it's a good idea to do it after you've built your schedule, but also after seat release. So if you're in that afternoon period of pastimes, you would want to do it after 12 p.m. because then it would show you which classes are going to be available during your pastime. Likewise, with the morning registration period, you could check, you know, the day prior, just because of how timing works. But never hurts a few minutes before your pastime to use that pre-reg tool, the pre-registration check tool. But do it early enough that you can make some changes if it's necessary.
Then we have a similar question about registration. When your pastime comes up, can you register for all classes at the same time, or do you have to prioritize and register one at a time?
No, register all will allow you to choose all of the classes saved to that schedule and register them all at the same time if they're available. That process does take a couple seconds though. So like I mentioned earlier, don't overclick, don't submit it hundreds of times. Click it once. Once it starts thinking, let it think, because it's trying to add you to each individual course that you have saved on that schedule, and checking to see if those seats are still available. So register all is your friend. After you've hit the register all button, if you need to swap in different courses, or you found a GE class that you wanted to add, you would save the GE class and then you could register that course individually. But the register all function will allow you to do everything all at the same time as soon as your pastime opens.
Next question we have is, are there enough seats for all engineering students in courses like Math 21B or ECS 36A?
I'm so sorry, can you repeat the question?
Are there enough seats for all engineering students in courses like Math 21B or ECS 36A?
That question includes very popular classes. So my experience has been that students get the classes that they need. There are times that the classes that they need or the classes that they want are not available in Pass 1 or in the quarter that they would like to take them. What's great about advising is that we work with you based on the situations that you're in, to identify the places where we can make changes to your recommended schedule based on what you actually are able to register into. So having a backup plan in case those classes are full is always a good idea, especially if you are going to have to waitlist for those classes in Pass 2. Most of the time students are able to get what they need, but I can't guarantee it, unfortunately.
And then a question, which is a common confusion when registering for classes. For days of the week in Schedule Builder, I know R means Thursday, but when a T is next to an R, TR, does that also mean Thursday?
T is Tuesday, R is Thursday. So if you see a class that has TR together, it's going to be a Tuesday, Thursday meeting time. Good question.
Yeah, the next question is, for classes that are going virtual, will students be given a UC Davis Zoom account or other modes of virtual communication?
Great question. So a lot of times our faculty are using programs in Canvas to communicate the different course materials, learning objectives, things like that. So Canvas is really popular. Different departments, though, might have additional resources that they use or different resources that they use based on how the material is delivered. Zoom allows students to, or allows anyone to set up a free account that does have some limitations with it, but if Zoom is required for your course, you should be able to interact with it, whatever free license you have available.
All right, the next question is, what does it mean when there is a Chem 2A course with lecture and laboratory discussion and a Chem 2A course with only lecture? Is there content
Oh,
that would not be included in one with only lecture?
such a good question. So a lot of times the sections of chemistry that are open and visible are the R sections. So in that section number, you see like CR0 or AR0. Those are sections for students who have the need to repeat the course. So it doesn't have a lab section because the student already took and passed the lab portion of the course. They need to repeat the lecture portion of the course. And so it will only appear as lecture. So yes, those classes will be missing information and are intended only for students repeating those classes.
Yeah, then we have a question from an incoming transfer student, which is, what if they weren't able to register for one of their courses due to the seat limitations? They mentioned that at their community college, if a student had their professor's permission, they could register for the course no matter what. So does Davis have anything similar to that?
We do have a process for students adding into the course with faculty permission. Many faculty will not offer that option to students until after the waitlist period is over because they want students to utilize the waitlists because they seem to be most equitable for students who need access to courses. So many times a student will be able to get into the course that they need from the waitlist. But in the event that they're not, it would be up to the individual faculty. We do not recommend approaching the individual faculty until the waitlists have been resolved. But it's always a good idea if you are waitlisted for a class to reach out to the faculty and let them know that you intend to add the class if at all possible. And you can see how open they are to allowing you to add after the waitlist period is over in the event that space does become available in the class. But there are times that there are restrictions to course size, either because of the nature of the course itself and the amount of feedback given, like in our writing classes, or due to space or instruction quality concerns.
Yeah, so the next question is, if I submit a prerequisite petition, will I be able to register for classes when they have their pass time, or do they have to wait for the petition to be approved?
You do not have to wait for the petition to be reviewed or approved prior to registration. And that's why we say we only want you to submit a prerequisite petition if you truly do have the prerequisite met, because faculty could drop you if you do not have the prerequisite met. So you can submit your petition and register for the course, but if you don't have the prerequisite met, then you may be dropped from the class.
Then the next question is, if the large lectures are online, what are the sizes of discussion groups, and will the discussion groups also be online?
Our expectation is that our class, all class functions for a large majority of our classes will be available online. We have a lot of unknowns right now in terms of what is going to be allowed and what's going to be safe for our UC Davis community at the time that classes begin. we really want to resume to normal, right? We want to get back to connecting with others and having the fun and exciting social aspects that come with college life. In addition to, we are balancing that need for connection and desire to be together with the health and safety of our community. So when it's safe to resume in-person activities, we will. But for now, you can expect that all different activities required for a course will be available online unless otherwise noted by the professor.
Then a similar question is, if all college engineering courses are online, will there be some exceptions? Are there some courses that will exclusively be offered in person?
We're waiting for more information. So for now, my advice is to register for classes that you need, assuming that they will be available to you in whatever format you would prefer, or in an online available format. So I would expect that there are just some very few undergraduate courses that are going to have any in-person meetings, and I don't expect them to be the kinds of courses that we are offering. I'm thinking of like maybe studio art classes where you really can't mimic the sculpture experience online in the same way that being in a studio might. But for our engineering classes, we were really successful in transitioning them to an online format. And so were our supportive courses in math and chemistry and physics. So we're hopeful to maintain that same consistency in learning in an online environment.
Yeah, so it's 11 o'clock right now. Are you still good to go for more questions?
I do have capacity for a couple more. Do we have a lot more, or do you feel like they're consistent in their themes?
Yeah, so one we have is, can I meet with my advisor during the pastime?
So you can meet with a advisor during your pastime. Our engineering undergraduate office will be supporting students in live format, and we'll send out an email that includes how to connect with us, but it will be a webinar format with Q&A. Then different departments will also have availability in different ways. So we're hopeful that we will be able to connect you with the right professional as soon as possible during that time, but it's going to be based on availability. So engineering undergraduate advising office will definitely be available though.
And a really good question is, what's the difference between a course and a section?
A course is the class that you're taking. A section is a portion of that course that meets at a particular day, time, location, group. If it's online, it's this small group, if you will, that are assigned together.
And the next one is, what kind of credit do you get for taking a first-year seminar?
Units.
What's the benefit of taking them?
So first-year seminars are a great way to dive into a particular topic and connect with others who are also interested in that same topic, as well as faculty that you may see again and again in your classes. So first-year seminars are a great way just to kind of nerd out or geek out on the things you really enjoy learning more about in a smaller group setting with more interaction with your faculty. And you get units. Yay!
Then
Some are graded, some are pass, no pass.
The next question is it possible to get a class of my choice aside from the ones recommended from my advisor?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier. For students in our college, we do have specific course priorities. So a recommended schedule may have been made for you based on those course priorities in that major. If you're thinking about changing your major, those priorities could change. If classes are unavailable, then you go to a secondary list of priorities there. If there's a class that you really want to take, it may or may not be advised, depending on the level of the class. If there's any conflicts with those classes that were identified as priorities, I think it's important to remember that you do have many quarters at Davis to have a truly awesome educational experience. And so we want you to consider all of the prerequisites that go into your major. Moving a prerequisite course means that it may have a ripple effect on the future courses that you take for your major, or to achieve different goals. And so we don't want to create a long-term problem by trying to take something new and exciting in the short term. So it may be a strategy of moving the course that you're interested in, or reassessing priorities for anything that may have changed in terms of the importance to you personally for a particular class or subject.
And the next question is from a student who is planning to register for 16 units, but would like to waitlist a 4-unit class during Pass 2. Since 19 units is the limit, is there a way around this, or will they have to wait until there's space to swap out a class?
Yeah, so unfortunately it's the latter. There's no way around the 19-unit max in Pass 2, but after registration freeze, there is a schedule adjustment period that allows students to waitlist for more units than that as we get much, much closer to the beginning of the quarter. But again, it's tricky to navigate those spaces right away. So it's always a good idea to check in with an advisor if you have those questions as we get closer to the start of the quarter.
Another question we have is, how can we tell that a class has more than 50 people? They can only view the number of open seats on waitlist. Is there somewhere they can view the class size?
So classes.ucdavis.edu is a tool that S and I were talking about as being our favorite. It's not nearly as pretty as Schedule Builder, but it does give you lots of great information. Everything is going to be listed by section, which can be misleading because a lot of different sections sometimes share the same lecture. For now, you can assume that anything that you're registering for fall quarter is going to be in an online format. And even though classes may be permitted to meet in person if they did have enrollment of 49 or fewer, they're likely not going to. And it would only be in very specific cases, and I can't think of any of our courses that have that format intended. So until future notice, you can assume that your classes will be available online.
Next question is another registration question, which is there a rough idea of how many people are on each time slot for the pastime? Do classes fill up quickly? And what would be a good target of open seats for registration?
I love the level of strategy that this student is thinking of. Our first year class is broken up, I think, in half, morning and afternoon appointment time. So, you know, if you were a gambler, right, you would want to look for the sections with the most opportunities for you to win a seat. So just be open-minded and flexible, and that's why it's beneficial to have several different schedules, or at least more than one, so that if a section that you were looking at does fill up faster than you expected, you would be able to quickly pivot to a different section.
A kind of similar question to that is this student has created 5 different schedules, and in all of them, only 1 or 2 classes have open seats. They're wondering if they're doing something wrong, and what their options might be.
You're probably not doing anything wrong, and seeing only 1 or 2 open seats might indicate that it is filling up quickly, or that there are some seat release seats scheduled to be released in that course. That's why our waitlist process is really helpful, so that if it is full at the time that you are registering, that you can get on the waitlist for those sections. But we do have some classes that are very popular and that are shared across the campus. So different sections may have limited availability.
Last few questions.
Great.
So I have a student who just did their ELWR for July. However, they still don't know what English courses they should take. What do they do when registering for English courses if they don't receive their ELWR results before Pass 1?
That's a great question. It would be a good time to check in with an advisor just to confirm your understanding. The university writing program and entry-level writing programs have great websites available, but if there's any question or concern about the information that the student has received or is missing, an advisor might be able to help clarify those things. So checking in with an advisor is a good idea. I love talking about entry-level writing, so feel free to contact me.
The next question we have is, what should I do if I'm trying to make a schedule and two of my courses have conflicting times, but the other sections for those classes that are not conflicting are already full?
Yeah, this is a common question, and it's just going to require flexibility on your part. Some classes, even though we talked about how classes are going to be available online, um, when classes are listed with a date, time, and location, it also allows them to fit into a slot where finals will not conflict. So if you can register for two classes that are not in conflict, that means that those finals for those classes are not in conflict. So it will be important to understand the priority of two classes that might be conflicting, which one's most important for the student to register in, and then plan around that accordingly. But again, checking those things right before registration time opens, and then moving on based on the most important priorities, and then just knowing in the future that changes can be made via waitlists or open registration.
And
I think we
then
have time for a couple more questions.
yeah, this will actually be the last
Okay.
question that we have, and it's from an international student.
Yay! Hi, international students.
So they're an international student and they won't be able to come to UC Davis in the fall due to late opening of consulates. So will they
Yes.
be able to see which classes are going to be online before they register?
So you can assume that any class that you see, especially first year students, are going to be available online. Those classes might have a simultaneous component to them. So a lab might be posted at a particular time, or you may have to interact with a discussion board at a particular time. So it is a good idea to be mindful of the timings of the classes that you're choosing, but the campus has worked really hard to try to identify early morning sections and late afternoon sections, so that students in different time zones would have access in a way that makes sense for them. Again, so my role in the college, if you haven't attended our earlier webinars, is specializing with our international student population. So feel free to contact me with any questions that you have relative to your specific circumstances.
All right, thank you so much, Jordan.
Thank you, S. And thank you everyone for attending the webinar. That's going to conclude our presentation. And we hope that your questions have been answered and you feel ready for registration. If any additional questions come up, again, we will be offering live support. So thank you so much for joining us, and take good care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your week.